Masechet Zevaḥim Daf Sadi He. Beged sheyasa chus lakelaim nichnas umchabeso b'makom kadosh. We already learned that if blood of a korban hatat gets sprinkled on any garment, then one has to launder that garment in the temple courtyard. But now the Mishnah deals with the case of what happens if that cloth went outside the courtyard. There was blood sprinkled on it, and then somehow someone took it out of the courtyard. They should not have done that, but now it's outside. The problem is we have to launder that garment inside. So what do? You bring it back inside the courtyard, and then you launder it in the courtyard. Simple enough. Here's the more complicated case. Nitma chutz lakelaim kor'o nichnas umchabeso b'makom kadosh. What if it became tameh and it's outside of the temple courtyard? Now you have a problem because you can't bring something tameh into the temple courtyard. You're not allowed. But you have to bring it in order to launder it. So how are we going to bring it in if it's tameh? The answer is we tear it. A garment, that is a whole garment, is a vessel and can receive tum'ah. It receives tum'ah. Now, one way to undo it is to tear it up so that it's no longer a garment. You tear it into strips that are not usable, and now it's no longer a keli, it's not a vessel, and therefore it's not tameh anymore. And then we bring it in, and then we launder it in the temple courtyard. You might ask, why not dip it in a mikveh? That's a different way of making it tahor, and you don't have to tear it up into pieces. The answer is that dipping it into a mikveh is going to be washing, and some of the blood is going to come off. That's a problem because it has to be laundered only in the temple courtyard. That is what the Torah says. So you can't put it into a mikveh. Instead, you have to tear it up and bring it in, and then launder it, and then what you do with it after, you could do whatever you want. You sew it back up, throw it out, whatever, turn it into rags. Keli cheresh sheyasa chus lakelaim nichnas v'shobro b'makom kadosh. Same law is going to be with an earthenware vessel. If it gets blood of chatat offering on it, if it was still in the temple courtyard, you'd have to smash it in the temple courtyard. But what if it went out of the temple courtyard? Well, then you have to bring it back in because it has to be broken in the courtyard. You can't break it outside. Nitma chus lakelaim nokabo v'nichnas v'shobro b'makom kadosh. If it became tameh and it's outside of the temple courtyard, now it's a problem. You can't bring it into the temple courtyard because it's tameh. So what are you going to do with it? You make a hole in it. Once you make a hole in it, let's say it's a vessel that was used as a water bottle to hold water. You make a hole. Well, now it's leaky. Now it's not usable. Since it's no longer usable for its purpose, it's not a keli anymore, so it's not tameh. Tumah leaves it. And then you bring it into the Bet HaMikdash, and then you break it. You don't break it outside because it has to be broken inside. But if you just make a hole in it, a hole is sufficient to make it no longer a vessel, but it's not yet breaking it. And so you bring it in and break it. Nikeli nechoshet sheyasa chus lakelaim nichnas umorko v'shotfo b'makom kadosh. Nitma chus lakelaim pochato v'nichnas umorko v'shotfo b'makom kadosh. And also the third item that's already mentioned in the Pisukim, if it's a metal vessel that you had blood of chatat offering that was cooked in it, and it's absorbed of that taste, the earthenware vessel, only also if it's cooked in it, and it's absorbed inside, and then it went outside the temple courtyard, you have to bring it back in. And when it's back in the courtyard, then you scour it and rinse it. However, if it became tameh outside of the temple courtyard, you can't bring it in as is because it's tameh, but we have to bring it in because it has to be cleansed inside. So what do? Pohato, you break it. So it's no longer a usable vessel, and then you bring it in, and then you scour it and rinse it in the temple courtyard. Matkif la Ravina kor'o beged amar chamana v'lav beged hu. Ravina has a question regarding the garment that is tameh. You said you're going to tear it up, but if you tear it up, it's no longer considered a garment. Well, that's the whole point of tearing it up. That once it's not a garment anymore, then it won't be tameh. But now it's also not a garment anymore. And the pasuk said you have to launder the garment. Now you're laundering just strips of rags. You're not laundering. It's not a garment anymore. So you're not fulfilling the Torah's law. And the answer is you tear up most of it, but you leave one small cloth, like one handkerchief size, so that's still called a garment, and the rest of it is torn up, and that way it won't be tameh anymore, but it can still be called a garment with this compromise. Ini ואמר רב הונא לא שנו אלא שלא שיער בה כדי מעפורת, אבל שיער בה כדי מעפורת חיבור הווה. Hold on, Rav Huna said that an impure garment that has been ripped up, then it loses its impurity. That's true, but that's only if you rip it up completely and you did not leave even one part that's a small cloth. But if you leave part of it as a small cloth, a handkerchief, then that is considered all joined and the garment remains tameh. In other words, according to Rav Huna, this solution doesn't work, that you tear up most of it and leave only a small piece, so that, okay, it's still called a beged, but the tumah leaves it. Rav Huna says, sorry, the tumah doesn't leave it. Even if you leave just a small piece that's usable, the tumah remains, and so now still tameh, you can't bring it in. And the answer is midrabanan hu. This law of Rav Huna is only dirabanan, this tumah. It says, so really on the deoraita level, as long as you rip up most of it and leave a little bit, mideoraita, it's tahor. And for the purposes of Bet HaMikdash law, that this mitzvah of laundering the blood of the garment, this deoraita law, will override this tum'ah midirabanan. Normally, ideally, we don't want to bring even the dirabanan tum'ah into the courtyard, but here we have to in order to fulfill the mitzvah deoraita, and therefore that overrides. Kili cheresh sheyasa. Same problem with a earthenware vessel that became tameh outside. So you said make a hole in it, and then it won't be tameh anymore. Yeah, but then it also won't be a keli. And the Torah said a vessel. You have to any earthenware vessel keli that because has blood on it, you have to break that vessel. But now it's already not a vessel because you made it unusable. So doesn't that mean now it's no longer a vessel? You put a hole in it. It's not a vessel for tumah. Then it's not a vessel for the law of breaking it in the courtyard. And the answer is shenikeh beshoresh katan. You made a small hole, as small as a small root of a plant, such that, for example, if this vessel was used for holding water, now the water is going to leak out. Since the water is going to leak out, it's no longer tameh, now it becomes tahor for that law. However, it's still usable to put olives in, because the olives are not going to fall through that little hole. And since it's still called the keli, for that purpose, that's sufficient to fulfill the law of breaking a keli in the temple courtyard. Keli nechoshet pochato, v'halav kelihu terasef mirsifhu. Same problem with the copper vessel, that if you break it outside, it's tameh. So it says break it, then it won't be tameh anymore. Yeah, but it also won't be a vessel anymore. So then you're not fulfilling the law of cleansing the vessel in the temple courtyard, because it's not even a vessel. And the answer is, you break it, but then you hammer it back. So it's all outside. It's tameh. You break it, so that's not usable. Now the tum'ah leaves it. It's tahor. That's it. And then you mend it. You hammer it back together, and now it is a vessel. And now it's a tahor vessel. Now you can bring it in, and you can scour and rinse it in the temple courtyard. אמר יש לקיש, מעיל שנטמע, מכניסו בפחות בשלוש על שלוש ומכבסו, משום שנאמר, לא יקרע. Now, so far we were talking about just regular garments, not holy garments. But what if the robe of the Kohen Gadol that he wears got dam, blood of hatat on it? And now, we said before, and it's outside the temple courtyard, and it became tameh. Now, you can't bring it into the temple courtyard because it's tameh, but we have to launder it in the temple courtyard. The solution that we said before, that cut it up into little strips, you can't do here because there's a pasuk regarding the bigdei kohen, says lo yikareya. You're not allowed to tear bigdei kohen. So we can't tear it either. What do? We bring it in slowly, very slowly. 3 finger breaths by 3 finger breaths at a time. We just take a little corner and bring it in to the courtyard, clean it, and launder it. And then we pull in another little bit and we launder that. And that way we're only bringing in a little bit at a time. Each little bit is too small to be a significant item. So it's similar to tearing it up, but instead of tearing it up, we're leaving it intact. But since you only brought in 2.5 by 2.5 in, so that's a tiny bit. It's not significant enough to be something tameh. That is not enough to say that you're bringing tumah into the courtyard. So it's okay. We're not bringing tumah into the courtyard, but it is a little bit in the courtyard so that we can launder it. And now it's laundered, and then once it's laundered, then it's okay, and then you bring the next little bit in. Motib Rav Ada Bad Ahava He'avin V'Harakim En Bahem Mishum Shalosh Al Shalosh. We have a challenge to this from a Mishnah in Masechet Kelim that says if a garment is very thick or very soft, then then you can bring even more than 3 by 3. This limitation of 3 by 3, that 3 by 3 and below is not tameh, but because it's too small to be usable. But more than that is usable. However, if it's something thick or soft, and the bigdei kohen gadol are thick. And therefore, since this is something thick, something 3 by 3, what could you use it for? We could use it for a patch. Okay, fine. But something that is very thick, you wouldn't use as a patch. Or if it's too soft, you wouldn't use it as a patch. And therefore, actually, it can be even bigger and will not contract tumah. And so, therefore, really, we can bring it even if it's bigger. So why don't we say bring in even bigger pieces at a time? And the answer is agav avihen hashiveh, because each of this little piece of the robe of the Kohen Gadol is considered significant because of the father, meaning the source, the entire robe. Since the entire robe is something that is a very important item, therefore, that makes even the small 3 by 3, if it's 3 by 3 or more, that will make it susceptible to tumah. So if it was not a bigdei kohen gadol, just a regular sheet that was thick, then indeed 3 by 3 would not be usable, so it could be even bigger and still not be tameh. But because it's part of an very important item of something that the kohen wears, therefore, it would be tameh 3 by 3. That's why we have to bring it in little by little, just less than 3 by 3, and then you can launder it and clean it and make it tahor little by little. And now we have a new problem that in order to do laundering, you have to use 7 different liquids. In those days, they didn't have Tide detergent, so they used various liquids, and one of them is meraglayim, urine. But you're not allowed to bring urine into the mikdash. So now we're going to have a problem. Let's see how we solve it. Rav Nachman, in the name of Rabba Bar Avu, said that blood of chatat that goes on a garment, or something that has a leprous mark, you have to, both of these have to be washed, and you have to wash them well using 7 different laundering agents. However, one of the 7 agents is meraglayim. And here's the problem: there's a braita that teaches you're not allowed to bring meraglayim lamikdash mepnei kavod. It's not respectful to bring that in there. So we have to launder it in the temple courtyard, and you have to launder it with urine, but you can't bring urine in. So we're stuck. What if you take the urine and you mix it together with all the other 7 substances and you apply them all at once? You can't bring urine by itself into the mikdash, but if you mix it in with other things, so now it's all absorbed, it's all together, and you use all 7 detergents in one mixture. Here's the problem. You can't do that. Mishnah Masechet Nida teaches, V'hatanan, Hebiran shelo kesidran, o she'avir shib'atan ke'achad, lo asa ve'lo kelum. If you apply each of these detergents out of order, it's a specific order you have to do it in, or if you put them all together, then you did nothing. It's not effective. You have to do each one in the proper order separately. So the metaglaim is going to have to be brought in separately. Back to our problem. And maybe you'll say, okay, I can take the metaglaim and mix it with one item, and then I'll have all 7, but the metaglaim I'll mix together with one of the other items, so maybe 2 detergent things I can mix together, and the rest will be separate. Is that good enough? No, that's also not good, because you have to rub with each detergent 3 times with that one, separately, independently. Tanan, that's what we learned. So you're going to have to take detergent number 1, wash it 3 times with that. So you can't mix one and the next and to put it together, because each one's going to have to be 3 times separately. So what do? Here's the solution. Ela demabla lehu berok tafel. So you take the metaglaim and you mix it up in tasteless saliva. That means saliva from someone that just woke up and they haven't eaten anything else yet, and that's particularly strong. And you take that and you mix it in. So now it's not pure urine. As long as it's mixed up with something else, then it's okay to bring in, although you're still allowed to use it for laundering. Not only is it okay, but actually you're supposed to do that. For every one of the 7 detergents, you're supposed to take the first one, mix it with this saliva, and apply it 3 times and rub it, and then the next one also mix it with the saliva and rub that 3 times, and you do that for all of them. So since in any case we're doing it for all of them, and we're going to do it with the metaglaim also, and therefore we're not bringing metaglaim in its pure form, and instead, since it's mixed up, it's permitted. The next Mishnah teaches, Echad shebishel bo, ve'echad she'ayra letocha roteach, echad kodshei kodashim, ve'echad kodashim kalim, teonin mirika ushtifa. Until now, we've been talking about the blood of a korban hatat that goes into a vessel, but now we're going to expand the law to other types of korbanot, and we're going to learn that any pot, a metal pot, that you cooked a korban in, or even if you didn't cook it in that pot, you cooked it in something else and then poured it while it was still roteach, still boiling hot, into a metal pot, that pot has to be scoured and cleansed. You have to kosher it. And it also does not matter if the korban is kodshei kodashim or even kodashim kalim. No matter what, you must scour and cleanse the pot. You have to kosher the pot. That's Tanakama. Rabbi Shimon Omer Kodashim Kalim en Teonin Mirika Ushtifa. Rabbi Shimon says, I agree regarding Kodshei Kodashim that you have to cleanse the pot. However, Kodashim Kalim, you do not have to cleanse the pot. The Gemara on the next daf will discuss exactly what he means. What do you mean? Even Kodashim Kalim becomes notar after 2 days, which means that whatever is inside, the absorbed taste, will also become notar after 2 days. If you're going to use the pot again, won't that be non-kosher that goes into something else? So perhaps even Rabbi Shimon would agree that you would need to cleanse it. In that case, but we're talking about an overarching law that you must cleanse, just like you have to cleanse a pot that where there's dam hatat, that's a mitzvah in and of itself, whether you use it again or not. And so it would seem that Tanakama would say there is an overarching mitzvah, and the Gemara will discuss that further. Tenora banan asher tebushal bo en li ela shebishel bo ara letocho roteach minayin Talmud omar v'asher tebushal bo yishaber. A Baraita brings a source for the first law, not only if it's cooked in, but also if it's poured into. That's to be like ayirui mikeli rishon. The pasuk says that which it is cooked in. So if you cook dam chatat in it, other korbanot in it, you have to wash it. I only know that if it's the pot that you cooked in. What if I poured it while it's hot into a pot that one that's poured into also has to be cleansed, because the pasuk has a double language. That which it is cooked in must be broken. So from the double language, I learned this other law. Ba'ed ami bar chama, tela'o ba'avir tanur mahu, abishul ubilua hu de kapid rachamana, or dilma abishul belo bilua. Rami bar chama, who always asks these technical questions, asks, what if one suspended the meat in the air space of the oven? You put it on a spit and you suspend it in air, but it's not touching the walls. And anything that drips down just goes on the floor or onto the coals, onto the dirt, and not onto the clay or onto the metal parts of the walls. So what about in that case? Are we talking about when the Torah says you have to cleanse it? Is that regarding a case where it's cooked directly on the oven and touching the oven, and also that it absorbs? Then the Torah says, if you cook on it and it absorbs taste, then you have to. Or what if it's cooked but it doesn't absorb? That's the case he's talking about. I'm cooking it inside the oven. It's in the airspace of the oven, but the walls of the oven are not absorbing anything because it's not touching. It's dangling in the middle of the oven. Do I still, even if it's not going to be absorbed, do I still need to kosher it? It's actually quite an essential question. Is this all about absorbing something that will become notad and there's not kosher? Is it about the taste itself of it going in? Is that what triggers this law? Or just any cooking in it already triggers the law and you have to kosher it? Amar Rava Tashema, Echad shebishel bo v'echad she'ira letocho roteach. Rava says, I can learn it from our Mishnah. It says whether you cook in it, or even if you don't cook in it, but you just pour the hot meat into it. So you see, it doesn't have to be cooked in it. So Rami Bar Chama says, no, that does not answer my question. I wasn't asking about if it gets absorbed and you didn't cook in it. You're right. Then the Mishnah says clearly, absorption of taste by itself will require koshering. Yes, for sure. My question was, you cooked in it, but no taste was absorbed. Does that require koshering? Tashema, Damar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Bar Avu, Tanur Shemikdash Shel Matechet Teya, Visa Kadatach Bishul Belo Bilua Lakapid, Naabid Shel Chayres. We can derive a law from the statement of Rav Nachman, name of Rabba Bar Avu, that the oven that was on the temple courtyard was made out of metal, so that between each time you use it, you could kosher it easily. You kosher it, you scour it, you rinse it, boil it in hot water, and then it will be kosher again. And so you could use it each time. Now, if you think that by cooking without absorption, in other words, if you just dangle it in the middle and not touch any of the sides of the oven, if you would say that in that case, the Torah did not require it to be koshered, then why do you have to bother making the oven out of metal? You could make the oven out of earthenware. It's much cheaper to make it out of earthenware, and you can use it again and again. So if you would answer your question of Rami Bar Chama, that you don't have to kosher an oven if it did not absorb, even though you cooked in it, then you could make it out of clay. But we don't make it out of clay, we make it out of metal. So that teaches us that even if you don't touch the walls, you dangle it, but you cooked in it, you still have to kosher it, and therefore it would not be practical to make it out of earthenware. You'd have to break it every time. So that's why they made it out of metal. So that seems to answer the question, right? No, not necessarily. In addition to cooking meat in the oven, which you can do by dangling the spit that the meat is on in the middle, but they also cook korban mincha, meal offerings. And when you cook bread, the way that they used to do in olden days, they take the dough and they stick it right onto the wall of the oven, and it would cook while it's stuck to the wall. And in that case, not only is it getting cooked in the oven, since it's also touching the wall, it's also absorbing taste. And the korban mincha also will become notar and that taste also will become prohibited. And so here we have a case, we're going to use the oven no matter what, not only for meat, but also for korban mincha. So for that reason alone, we need to make it out of metal so that it can be cleansed and koshered between each time that we use it. And so that's why we make it metal, even if it could be that if you put it in the airspace and doesn't touch anything, it could be that it would not require koshering. And if it was just for meat, maybe you could use clay, but we're using metal for the korban mincha. So we cannot offer an answer from this fact alone. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen.